You're watching Central Illinois on the Record.
All right, welcome back. We are joined by State Representative Dan Brady. Thank you very much for being here.
Nice to be with you, Paul. Thank you for having me.
All right, so going into the summer, a little bit better than the last couple of 3 summers. A state budget.
Well, it is. It's a much better feeling, I can say that. And it's stability. And stability for those who depend on the state, obviously K through 12 education, higher education, social service agencies, our agencies within the state, public safety. So that's it's much better from a solid footing program. Now, it's not everything to all people. It's not perfect, but it's much better than where we have been in the past. We really had 3 objectives. One, we wanted a balanced budget. We wanted a budget that had no new taxes, and we wanted a full year's budget. And we accomplished all 3 of those things, in my opinion.
You know, some critics are saying or asking, is it truly a balanced budget? You don't really know for sure that it's a balanced budget until maybe a few months down the road, right?
Well, I think that's in part correct, but what one has to remember is we also had an FY supplemental for 18, which means you're carrying over what is debt from FY 18. Now, there's appropriations made to pay that down. And that's something we're going to have to watch very, very closely. But for FY 19, for our new fiscal year budget beginning July 1st, I believe that we have the revenue, and the spending does not exceed that revenue, roughly $38.5 billion. And so, therefore, in my eyes, that's a balanced budget.
And that seems to be the consensus, which, you know, is kind of what you have to go on. Do you feel like with that Budget Transparency Act that helped in this process? I know it was obviously something that passed the General Assembly overwhelmingly, despite the governor's veto. Mm-hmm. But I've heard kind of that maybe it was helpful, but maybe it wasn't absolutely necessary. What's your?
Well, I think it was helpful. But I think what was more helpful in this budget process was the budgeteers, of which I started out being one of those individuals, and then that was whittled down to a very, very small group from each caucus. I think that was very important that the rank and file, once again, was working with our leaders, with the governor, with the speaker, the president of the Senate, and the list goes on, our minority leaders. And we were able to provide them with alternatives, ideas, numbers, all the things that helped in their negotiations. And a key part of this whole thing was the fact that the communication continued between the governor, the speaker, and the leaders, and that was very, very important, all driven by the rank and file.
During the previous years of the budget impasse, the governor insisted on elements of his turnaround agenda. We didn't see that this year, so some people are asking what was the point of the governor holding up the budget process in previous years if this year, an election year, we didn't see that? Well,
I think, number one, the governor, now that he's been in office for a period of time, has found that governing is very difficult. And that it is not his sole choice in these matters, and I think he's learned that. I think that with his turnaround agenda, those are all things that he pointed to that could be good things that could help the state of Illinois. Now, he didn't get exactly what he wanted, but he did get a full year budget. He did get a budget with no new taxes in it, and that was very, very important. So I would certainly call that a win for the governor.
It's something that I want to talk about that obviously was part of the budget, and I know that institutions of higher learning were happy about stability, and I know it was something that you have been working with your partners in the Senate with, specifically Chapin Rose.
Correct.
On higher education. Just to be very general about it, but talk about what you were able to accomplish, what you're happy about. I know one of those elements was MAP grant funding, more stability for 4 years, and that you think that is something that is going to help keep students in the state because it will provide them, as I said, more stability over the time period that they're expected to be in school.
I definitely do. Late last fall, Senator Chapin Rose and I worked on legislation dealing with really the overall aspect of higher education, in particular focusing on how are we going to keep our best and brightest here in Illinois that are exiting the state and keep them into our universities. And so what came from that, though, was our Democratic colleagues in the Senate and the House, in particular Senator McGuire and then Representative Kelly Burke from the higher ed committees, worked with us, came together and said, you know what, in a bipartisan fashion, this wasn't legislation that mandated us to do it. This was a working group that had been working for over, I think we had 18 meetings throughout the course of this budget process, and some very, very good things came out of that. One of the things that you made mention was the 4-year MAP grant. Some of the other things that we're talking about is the potential of the application process and Common App and things that are going to come eventually out of that for applying to our state universities, coming out with really financial focus for that student, and how do we make higher education more obtainable here in Illinois. The second phase of what we're going to be doing is then talking about a funding formula, more of a level funding formula that respects, I think, really enrollments in our universities. So overall, the university's system, I think, is definitely on more solid ground. Appreciative. Did they get everything? No, but they got about a 2% across the board, about $25 million new dollars towards the MAP, $400 roughly million that are in the existing MAP program that stayed stable. So there was a lot of things important to our universities, in particular to Illinois State University that I represent. A capital part of what the governor's introduced FY19 was around $66 million in capital needs, desperate capital needs for our university, and the way in which to pay that through a bonding authority. And so I'm very encouraged for higher education. We've come a long way, got a ways to go, but this is the most stable, solid news they've had in quite a little while.
I know to a certain extent institutions of higher learning, after that K-12 bill was passed last year, they kind of said, hey, what about us?
Right, and that's what's forthcoming from this group. I believe it's needed. If you look at Illinois State University, they're funded about number 4 out of our 9 state universities. They're going to receive over $66 million for their general operating funds from our budget. And so that's very, very good news for Illinois State University. And I'm very, very honored to be able to represent that university and be able to be down in the trenches in Springfield to help that university and all of our universities. There's some great universities, but we have to work on, what we have to work on is those numbers. What we have to work on is what the universities are capable of doing and what they're not capable of doing and shouldn't be doing. And so that's going to be the next challenge for this working group in higher education.
So how much work is being done now and throughout the summer and back into the fall?
We plan, the working group plan on later this summer reconvening into what will be the fall veto session and really focusing in now on what is going to be some type of a funding formula. I don't think there's anyone in Springfield that could explain what is the funding formula for higher education in the state of Illinois. And so that is going to be something, and I think we probably have some of the ideas that would mirror K through 12 and the new funding formula there. And I think that will be very, very helpful, but that's going to be work going on late this summer and into the fall. And all the universities have been very helpful in their input. Some of the things we did they liked, and some of the things we did they didn't like. But that's how you get a good package at the end of the day.
All right. Well, certainly appreciate your time. We'll look forward to seeing how the rest of that package plays out for institutions of higher learning, colleges and universities. They are certainly going to be watching with great attention as well. State Representative Dan Brady, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Good to be with you.
All right.